Hey, Shalom Markins from Karmak from Jim is London, giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem Chakwadash. Want to give double honors unto the elders, the apostles of GMS, and Shalom out there to the hopeful elect, pushing his truth in all sincerity. Back again with another video, and I got this article here from USA Today. And Trump signs order classifying fentanyl as weapon of mass destruction. Right? And, sounds kind of outrageous, but, this guy is outrageous. Right? This has, severe ramifications moving forward, or potentially, right? The way this could go is that now these drugs are, as opposed to being treated as a crime if you moving this stuff or using this stuff or whatever, you could be deemed as a terrorist, right? And whether foreign or domestic, Jake is involved in these different type of activities, right? And so you're not just criminals anymore, right? You are terrorists, and like I said, nothing's off the table with this dude. So he can deem you Jake out there as terrorists, whether you're on foreign land or you're domestic inside the United States, and you don't have to be treated the same way as a criminal, right? Because obviously this guy's currently blowing up people and boats and everything in the Caribbean right now. These Venezuelan ships or whatever, right? So he's quite happy just to murk you off, right? Rather than be go through the court processes of being a criminal and that. No, if you're a terrorist, no, he got the he acting like he got the right to destroy you. All right, so this has ramifications, and it will have ramifications going forward, right? Because this is him extending his power, into broader domains of what he's able to do to you, to you, Jake, or whoever, right? Under these terrorist kind of circumstances, which he's now labeling these drug cartels as terrorists or whatever, right? But let me read some of this article from Washington, right? President Donald Trump has taken action classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction as his administration escalates efforts to combat the flow of illicit drugs into the United States. Trump signed an executive order on Monday, 15th of December, to formalize the designation, which comes after the president signed off on unprecedented airstrikes on alleged drug-carrying boats in the Caribbean from Venezuela. Right, and he says no bomb does what this is doing. Right, Trump said in the remarks from the Oval Office, pointing to overdose deaths caused by fentanyl in the United States. Right, so yeah, fentanyl's fucked up, innit? But we know that you're behind it, Esau. You are the what they call that? You are the premier of the black market, man. Right? You make the market. you're the creator of this black market, right? So we know it's usually you that's moving this stuff around at the top, right? But you're getting lower level dudes to do the dirty work, so to speak, right? Because they can be caught, because they'll do this, right? They'll criminalize or what would you call that now? Then what would you call that? You criminalize Jake, right? But now you want to turn him into terrorist, so you. I don't know. I ain't got a term for that yet, right? You turn Jake into terrorist or whatever, right? Because they're doing these drugs or whatever. Because how far does it? How would it go? What other drugs can will we sign off on and say, that's danger to American people, so we got to deem that a weapon of mass destruction too, But he'll quick to do that to Jake that are, on the streets that are visible, right? Because everyone thinks, the Jake runs all the drugs and shit because it's visible, right? When all the money is up on top, right? But no one's going to investigate these guys at the top and deem them terrorists or nothing like that, So yeah, no bomb does what this is doing, Trump said, right? Pointing to the overdose deaths caused by fentanyl in the United States. So we're formally classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. It's kind of crazy, right? That these men are waging war, right? So Trump signed the order, but but if you're in a war, it means you can kill. You know, Trump signed the order as he awarded service members medals for their work securing the U.S.-Mexico border following aggressive actions the president pushed during the first year of his second term to crack down on illegal immigrations. So it's unclear whether the classification will mean significant changes to Trump's administration's ongoing efforts to curb the flow of fentanyl, which the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates has killed more than 80,000 Americans in 2024. Right, it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot. You know, it says the order directs Attorney General Pam Bondi, which I found strange when I first read that because you'll see the Bondi shootings that just took place, a bit weird, right, or coincidental, right. To immediately pursue investigations and prosecutions related to fentanyl trafficking. It commands the State and Treasury Department to target assets and financial institutions of individuals involved in drug trafficking. Right. So, yeah, you can see how this could become a lot broader than just tackling fentanyl, right? Because their men are going to be getting assets and funding, to crack down this harder. So the order further calls for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Bonnie to determine whether the threats posed by fentanyl warrant resources from the Defense Department, right? So, let me carry on read first. From the Defense Department and for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to identify networks responsible for smuggling fentanyl to support the full spectrum of counter-fentanyl operations, right? So like I said, they're going to be receiving funded. Well, they're looking at whether or not it's worth putting resources from the Defense Department, okay, a military department, right, to tackle all these, in-house stuff, basically. So Trump's moving more and more power to be used inwardly inside the United States and in and around it. And like I said, where does it stop? Is it just is it just for the fentanyl dudes? Or can they deem other drugs as dangerous as fentanyl or whatever, right? Because like I say, Jake's being used to move it, and so they're being, they're catching the blame and catching the bombs right now, right, and getting put to death, right? But I said Esau's at the top running it, okay, and he's excluded because ain't no one gonna go and look into him. So illicit fentanyl is closer to a chemical weapon than a narcotic, the order reads. 2 milligrams, an almost undetectable trace amount equivalent to 10 to 15 grains of table salt, constitutes a lethal dose. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have died from fentanyl overdoses. The government has historically used the term weapons of mass destruction to describe weapons of war. The Department of Homeland Security defines weapons of mass destruction as a radiological, chemical, biological, or other device that is intended to harm a large number of people. So, like they said, these broad terms now is now being put on, the American people. 80,000, is enough. It's deemed to be a large number of people. This drug is now deemed to be a weapon of mass destruction. Because there's lots of, there's a broader scope. They can use these things. These definitions that they use can be used in a broad sense. And that's what's happening right now. Trump is, whoever is using it as to extend further, to encapsulate more things. In February, Trump designated some drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, right? A move administration's officials argue. Let me read that again. A move administration officials argue gives them legal justification for the strikes on boats in the Caribbean, right? So let's say you deem someone a terrorist organization, then you have the kind of the green light to go and use force, like deadly force, against them, right? So you label these guys as terrorists, and the men are waging war with weapons of mass destruction, and that basically you're being targeted, right? Trump looking to put you to death. you know. But like I said, these guys can be found inside of America, right? Because they go across, right? And deal with the groups on this side, you know. Trump's latest order said that the manufacturing and distribution of fentanyl, like traditional weapons of war, threatens our national security and fuels lawlessness in our hemisphere and at our borders. It also stated that the two cartels responsible for the distribution of most of the fentanyl in the United States engage in large-scale violence and death that go beyond the immediate threat of fentanyl itself. Further, the potential for fentanyl to be weaponized for concentrated large-scale terror attacks by organized adversaries is a serious threat to the United States, the order said. And they would know. And they would know, man, because this is exactly what they did to China. Okay? They had them man strung up on opium, you know, to fuck them up, right? These men know all about that, man, because these men are criminals, right? Right? They're guilty of all these wicked ass acts, right? So they would know. They would know. All right. But like I said, it's being turned upon Jake, right, to be deemed as terrorists, as people that deserve to be killed, basically destroyed, you know, and that's kind of like the real takeaway from this, really, right? He's using these definitions and broadening their meaning, right, which is putting you, Jake, more in the fire in the firing line, you know. Let's start my thing. All right, this is Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. And now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Ye have God said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden, right? Esau is this slick serpent, right? Who bends, the rules that he makes, right? But they're purposely left ambiguous and grey. And so he can extend what these definitions mean, right? He's slick. So I said, what was the classical way or the traditional way of understanding these definitions is he can now change, right? And like I say, he can point, the gun, so to speak, at in any direction, pretty much. He can deem all these things as terroristic or something that can cause mass destruction or whatever the case may be. He can do that, right? And like I said, you Jake, are always in the crosshairs, of this dude. Right, because he's blaming everything on you, or blaming everything on us, even though he's the one, the real guy behind the scenes running it all, It's 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11 says, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, we are not ignorant of his device. We're not ignorant how Esau moves, right? He's a devil, he's a liar, right? He's not trustworthy, right? And like I said, he's slick, right? So this is what he's doing now to increase his power and his ability to kill, in and around America. Because don't think, like I said, he's already labeled some of these guys inside the US as terrorist organizations. So what do you think can happen to them? You don't think he's gonna murder them off? He's not gonna give, he ain't gonna give them a trial, for criminal activities. No, he's not gonna trial them as criminals, as drug dealers, as they would usually. They'll be deemed as terrorists, and so that's a whole different thing now. So in operations like how they're doing now, they just go around blowing up stuff, busting, they can quite easily go bust down doors and put people to death. They can do that. Or they resisted or whatever. They're not going to just arrest them and give them a quote unquote fair trial. They're not going to do that. You don't have to no more. It's Psalm 64 verse 2. It says, hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity, who whet their tongue like a sword and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words, right? That they may shoot in secret at the perfect. Say they do shoot him and fear not. Right? They're moving on you, Jake, man. Right? And they're starting with the quote unquote criminal element. But then, what about those that are associated with the criminal element? It's something we've always been speaking about. because this, the AI thing is working overtime, right? Identifying potential criminals or problems, situations, all right. But Jake is so close to that world because Jake has been influenced by hip hop and gang culture and all that kind of stuff, right? So we all dress as we don't all dress, but then we dress all similar type of way and act particular types of ways, right? Even if we're not affiliated with any gangs or anything like that, Jake just has they've been influenced, given that American culture, man. And they got cousins, and they all got somewhere there's this tie somewhere, you know what I mean, with someone, but they can easily get caught up in something. The AI targets them or picks them out as a potential threat and this and that. Or they own a gun or whatever the case may be. Or they used to do drugs at one point, they don't do drugs now, or whatever the case may be, right? But best believe that information is always being collected, right, to target Jake, to use it, for it to be used against Jake, right? And it's going to be, as I said, the rules are changing. How Esau is going to deal with you guys is changing. It's going to change. It's going to change, right? They encourage themselves in an evil matter. They commune with laying snares privily. They say, who shall see them, right? You don't see the angle that Esau is creating for himself on you, man, right? They search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search. Both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. All right. It's Revelation chapter 12, verse 12. So therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath. Right. And he's going to show that soon, man. Right. Because he knows he have but a short time. Right. They're trying to get their new world order in, man. And, they're putting all these things in place. Right. The power, the lethality of this new world order, man. Right. This world is going to plunge into darkness, man. It's already dark, but you know what I mean. It's gonna go further, right? It's gotta go further, man. Don't want that yet. It's Ezekiel 35, verse 6. And let me read from the top, actually, right? Verse 1 says, moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. And say unto it, thus saith the Lord God Jehovah, behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out my hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord God Jehovah, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. So if thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. That's what I make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it him that passeth out and him that returneth. Right? Before I carry on, man. Yeah, man. This anger, this hatred you have towards Israelites, this is why you're hunting us down, man. And like I say, eventually you're gonna try and turn this in on just regular Jake. And you trying to turn this into the prophets, because you look at them as a terrorist organization too, because they don't preach about the wellness of America and the Edomites, so-called white people, because we don't preach for you, right? We preach against you. You want to say basically, look, these men are terrorists or potential terrorists or whatever. That's what you're going to turn around and say, because you have the power to do that now. That's what you've been doing, right? So you've been slowly working your way. It's the whole ice thing and everything like that. You've been working your power inward to use it inwardly. Using defense budgets and all that kind of thing. Militarizing the police and all these things you've been doing over the years, right? To internally use this power, against the U.S. citizens. Right, so you get the power of death and all these different types of things, right? Right, and you're gonna be able to use the military or some forms of the military, National Guards or whatever, right, to be able to do this. Which you're not meant to be using all that on home soil. But this is what you're doing. You're using this power to use it inwardly, against its own citizens. Because you were saying, oh, the threat's so crazy. We got use the military or the National Guard and all these different types of things here. Okay, now you're licensed to label people differently and use more lethal means. All right, but like I say, it's all aimed at you, Jake, man. You know, this is carrying on verse 8. It says, I will fill these mountains with these slain men, in thy hills and in thy valleys, and in all thy rivers shall they fall that are slain with the sword. I will make thee perpetual desolations, and thy city shall not return, and ye shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. All right, so I'm going to read on that. Pardon me. It's Isaiah 14 and 17. Let me read up a little bit. Verse 16, they that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble and did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? Right? And we're the prisoners of Esau, man. Right? But let's say he looking to throw more you, Jake, into prison and or be put to death. Like he really targeting Jake, right? And like I said, it's going to extend further than just these guys that are, slinging fentanyl. It's Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7 says, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Right? The time of Jacob's trouble is coming. And is already here in some ways, right? But we don't think it's going to get a hell of a lot worse. Right? Esau is going to become a hell of a lot more violent. Right? And you can see that. Okay, he's moving more violent. And he's looking to do more. Right? But the time of Jacob's trouble is definitely upon us. Right? So let me close out with this. 2 Ezra chapter 16, verse 71. Actually, verse 70, right? It says, for there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. Right? So say it's going to extend further than just this fentanyl thing. Right? Fentanyl is just it's a precursor. It's just the excuse to, do all this extra shit that they be doing. Changing definitions and whatever. Right? They should be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord. Right? Because they want to get to us eventually. It's just that apart from the things that we're saying, we ain't doing anything. We're not militarized. We're not doing all this bullshit. We're just out there with our scriptures, man, and that's it. Esau can't really accuse us of anything really, other than prophesying the downfall of America, man. That's all they can really say. We haven't really done nothing to nobody. But eventually they're gonna try and group us in with all this, terrorist elements and whatever, to demonize the truth. And use our people as a scapegoat, just like they did back in Rome, when Rome was set on fire. Was it by Nero? Well, he fiddled away, right? It was all being blamed on the Israelites, on the Jews, man, right? And that's when he's become, well, he is the accuser of our brethren. And I swear I had that here. I don't see it. Does I not save it? Let me grab that. Accuser. Oh, it was up above. Revelation 12 and 10. So, and I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his anointed, Yahushua. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night, right? As I say, he's trying to make us the scapegoat, the reason why his kingdom is failing, why his kingdom is ain't right. Forget about all the wickedness that he promotes and the culture that he promotes and the fact that he's running all the drugs and creating all the wars on the earth and doing all the pollution. Forget all of that. Jake is the issue. Jake is the problem. Jake is the issue of with the world. These immigrants, these people that are not really Americans, they're African Americans, not really patriotic and all this and that. You know, we like I say, to him we're the real problem on this earth, but that's just not the truth. Because behind everything is you devils, you Edomites. And so yeah, we're involved in the shit that we're involved in. No, we're not defending the wicked of our people and the wicked shit that they're doing, but behind it all is you. You're the reason, right? But these Edomites don't ever take accountability for nothing. So, you know, you are the accuser of our brethren, man. Trying to make us the scapegoat. Like I say, it starts off with all these gangs or whatever, but then what about these men that speak against America, or they got to go to, right? So you're gonna be, you're gonna come down as madmen sparing none, right? So like I said, the game's changing, man. Esau's changing the rules like he always does, right? And using it to his advantage, So, that's what I foresee for all of this, right? By him doing this, classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. All right. But, I'm going to end it there. Lord, when this has been edifying, catch you brothers and sisters on the next video. Until next time, I say shalom.